Thank you so much. So I'm the sponsors chair. So for those of you who are New England Hymns sponsors, could you stand up? I'd like to have everyone give you a round of applause, because without you, we wouldn't be able to have this great chapter. So all the sponsors who help sponsor New England Hymns, can you stand up? Thank you. So with that said, we're going to have a panel of 3 of our premier sponsors here, and we have a moderator, Mary Maloney, our incoming president of New England Hymns, and I'm just going to read the bios of our 3 panelists. So our first panelist is Scott Marshall. Scott is worked in healthcare for over 12 years, specializing in healthcare-centric business solutions. As a healthcare regional manager, Scott is responsible for driving VCE sales and partner strategies for the Northeast. Prior to joining VCE, Scott managed Bridgehead Software and Semantics Healthcare practice for the Northeast. Scott has also held various sales and marketing positions with IT-focused companies. Scott was in the U.S. Navy as a commissioned officer, pilot, SAR swimmer. He earned his MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management and a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Maine, a great state that Ralph hails from. And me too. So I'm going to let Scott just do a very brief overview of his company.
Sure, thank you, Melissa. I'll make this short and sweet. VCE, we're a converged infrastructure made up of Cisco, EMC, and VMware stack, and it's really designed to give exceptional customer experience and fast application deployment.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, VCE, for your premier sponsorship of New England Hymns. We greatly appreciate it. Our next panelist is Julie Lochner. She's the Vice President of Informatica. Julie is responsible for business development and product marketing strategies, ensuring Informatica data privacy and data archive solutions are aligned with the market needs and the direction. Julie joins Informatica from the industry analyst firm ESG, where she served as Vice President covering big data and data management best practices, as well as managing the end-user consulting practice. Prior to joining ESG, Julie was president and founder of Centrific Info, a consulting firm acquired by ESG, specializing in implementing data governance and data center optimization programs. Julie also held various sales, marketing, and engineering positions at companies such as Solex, EMC, Oracle, and Raytheon. And Julie, I'm going to let you give a brief overview of your company. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So for those of you who are familiar with Informatica, you would know us from our data integration technology. We're the leading data integration provider for data warehousing and analytics markets. But what many of you may not be aware of is that Informatica also provides solutions to help healthcare providers and payers secure sensitive data. So we have a practice around data privacy, data security solutions, data archiving for compliance, as well as master data management. So from mastering your patient data, those are the areas that Informatica helps you.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you for your premier sponsorship of New England Hymns as well. And we also have, I like to call him V for short, because Vasilios Nassopoulos is our principal of Revenue Cycle Solutions line at Leidos Health. V possesses over 23 years of healthcare experience. Prior to joining Leidos Health, he held leadership positions at 3 major New England healthcare organizations. As a coding and compliance manager at Leahy Clinic in Burlington, he developed a robust clinical documentation auditing and improvement department. He was progressively given larger responsibilities, including patient financial services at UMass Memorial for over 13 years after being appointed Vice President of Revenue Cycle and Compliance at Southern New Hampshire. Vasilios has an extensive and a successful track record on multiple projects where he's established trend-setting best practices and achieved exemplary results. His accomplishments include best practice KPIs for both patient financial services departments and RevCycle in general. As a certified coder with a strong medical terminology background, V successfully implemented CDI programs at Southern New Hampshire when he was VP of Revenue Cycle, and at Grady Hospital as a project director. He's recently been promoted at Leidos Health as a principal in our Revenue Cycle group within our solutions group. And I also represent Leidos Health, and just a quick overview is we're formerly Vitalize Consulting Services as well as Max IT, and we came together to do everything from strategy to go live support. Whether you have Epic, Meditech, Cerner, Siemens, we basically help clients with whatever their initiatives are, and whether it be on the clinical side of the house or the revenue cycle. And so V, thank you for being here tonight. And with that said, I'm going to hand this over to our moderator, Mary Maloney.
Thank you. So we're going to keep the question short and sweet so that our panel here can discuss some of the topics that they're up here to discuss. And I'm going to start with Julie. You're going to get the first question. You're Informatica. Obviously, everybody thinks of analytics. I think you can't, open your email box nowadays without seeing something about big data, analytics. So from your perspective, from the vendor perspective, what are you seeing, what are you hearing, what are the concerns that some of the providers and payers are voicing?
It's interesting because if you look at where the healthcare industry is going, analytics is really one of those things where I feel like we're a little bit late to the party, right? I mean, it's a very mature and robust practice, but the problem is that you need access to the information to be able to do real true predictive analytics and get value out of it. And if you look at where data is locked up in a lot of the legacy systems, there's a big trend right now to not only take data out of those legacy systems and build a data warehouse, but also to look at external data sources and start to collect information and share information across payers and providers alike. So from a trend perspective, one of the things that we're seeing is that the data that's being collected in the hospitals and by researchers and clinicians are being locked down by those organizations either because of privacy or because they don't have the right tools or the infrastructure from a people process perspective to be able to share the data. So sharing of information without exposing privacy is one thing. The other, on the flip side, is a lot of times we're storing information, but people don't even know that they have it and can use it for research. So one of the biggest challenges I see is that there's a ton of information available that could actually be used to predict certain outcomes or help patient care, but the rest of the people that just the lack of knowledge that people are missing, that the department over here has this information and I can't get access to it. So it's really more of a communication that I think is a trend that we need to help address.
What about taking that data and mining that data and then getting it into a usable format in another application?
Sure, so I mean, obviously the big data trend, everyone talks about Hadoop, but Hadoop isn't the silver bullet, right? You really need to be able to look at, so first of all is defining an analytics project. What is the goal, right, that you're looking to achieve? Not just collecting the data. I was sitting next to someone this morning, she's like, well, we're just collecting genomic data and they don't have a purpose for it. Well, I mean, once you define what your purpose is, you really need to look at, all right, what are the different ways that you're going to consolidate, aggregate, store, and then analyze the data, right? And just because Hadoop is the buzzword today or du jour for analytics, it's not the be-all, end-all. So you really need to kind of understand, well, what's the purpose of the analytics? Are you going to be doing modeling or predictive analytics? Then maybe you should be doing an evaluation of columnar databases or something that has more performance-based characteristics versus on the traditional data warehouse, which might be used primarily for looking in the rearview mirror, looking at past trends in aggregate form. So there's a lot of technology out there that's point solutions to solve a particular problem. But before you go out and invest in one of those technologies, it'd be a good idea to really know what's your goal, right? And then what can you do with the information or the results of that data? Is it to improve patient care? Is it to improve your financial return on your investments, et cetera? I mean, a lot of this you guys probably already know, right? So it's not something new, but you're not alone. I mean, this isn't something that's specific to healthcare. We see it across all the industries. Analytics is really taking off across You know, every CIO has been asked or tapped on the shoulder to come up with an analytics plan, right?
That's true. Now I'm going to move down to V, and we have all this data, and now there's going to be a major change in this data, and I think everybody sort of has been ignoring it, and now we realize that ICD-10 is going to be here. So how is ICD-10 going to impact us in some of from the analytics point of view, do you think? And particularly in things like CDI, case mix indices, pay for performance.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. So let me start by thanking you for inviting me. And this is a revenue cycle guy, and I know when you said finance, you looked at me. I have no idea of anything about finance. So, but most importantly, I graduated with a sports med degree, so finance is not my. And when I was listening to the description of your company, it was all Greek to me, man. I tell you that. So it sounded so impressive. I have no idea what it said. So, all right. For all the wrong or right reasons, we are facing ICD-10, which has been looming for the past 20 years. I've been in healthcare for 23, so I've been hearing it's coming in the past 20 years. I'm not going to go into the reasons why we're bringing it, but I can tell you that the explanation was pretty lame and inaccurate. So let's see how it's going to impact organizations and physicians financially. First of all, it has already started impacting them, right? By getting ready to face the coding changes. So your IT is getting ready and hand in hand, holding hands with your Epics and your Sorians, trying to get ready or buying systems that they're ICD-10 ready, okay? And that is the word that I want you to forget when you walk out of here. They're ICD-10 systems ready, but ICD-10 starts from one point only. And if that doesn't not take place, no matter how ready you are in your IT department, or your patient financial services department, or your finance department with your analytics and reports, it starts in one point, and that's the provider documentation. This morning, 7 o'clock, it was 7 degrees in New Hampshire, by the way. And it's a true story. I went to the dermatologist. I had a reaction to a medication that was given to me to counteract the reaction of another medication. So after she evaluated me by not having any eye contact with me because she was so focused on her EMR system, Epic, by the way, nothing wrong with Epic. That's a different, invite me next time, I'll talk to you. She came up with the conclusion that I will need another medication to counteract the medication that was counteracting the other medication, which of course I had to listen to. This is a true story. But my question to her was, how the heck are you going to code this now? In the ICD-9 world, you're coding it in such a simple way, which is allergic reaction to the medication. In the ICD-10 world, this particular provider will have to go back, not to the medical school, but literally back to her, all the textbooks to indicate all the symptoms and the reasons why I had a red face today. And she has to describe it in such a way that when it arrives the coder's desk or a robust software, it will interpret it to a code, a CPT, an ICD-10 code. If it does not, it has a domino effect on how the reporting of the case is not going to be accurate. Thus, your case mix index is going to start going down. I'm exaggerating to make a point. Just take that particular example and put it in a hospital setting, right? So it's not going to be, my condition is not going to be reported in the right proper way. Thus, the case mix index is going to go down. It's going to mean into translation thousands, if not millions of dollars lost. And then eventually, when pay for performance kicks in, many providers and many organizations, if the physician and the provider documentation is not meeting the requirements of ICD-10, are going to be penalizing penalized as not providing quality of care. That's the impact. I'm not trying to make it black and ominous to you. What I'm trying to tell you is, yes, you're focusing on technology. You need a CDI department, very robust, and you need to be hand in hand with your providers in order to have a successful ICD-10 implementation.
Okay.
And I thought your face was red because of St. Patrick's Day or something like that. With a name like Vasilios, I thought, yeah, for sure you'd be drinking Guinness, Irish.
Or pretending, one or the other. And now for something completely different.
So V, put your fingers in your ears, because
Yes,
I'm going to go
sir.
super technical.
You can take the rest now. Okay, many hospitals are beginning to explore what your company is doing, the converged infrastructure. So, for those of us who haven't had that much experience with this, what are they looking for? How are they going to implement it?
So there's, so basically, hospitals right now, and as I talk to directors of IT and CIOs up and down New England, and they're being challenged with a lot of the applications that you guys deal with, because those drive revenue, they drive business value for that organization. And what we're hearing back is that basically what converged infrastructure does and what it's designed to do, very simple, right? It's just basically designed to be agile and allow organizations to do more with what they have. So some of the bigger challenge they have is, what's the total cost of all these parts and pieces that they're trying to manage. They want to be a lot more agile with how they roll out applications. They want to be able to roll out applications a lot faster than 3-6 months. I don't know how many times I have conversations with folks, and it takes them 3 to 6 months to roll out an application, whether that's virtual application, whether that's services, and they spend a significant amount of money on parts and pieces that are sitting on their dock, and they're not making them money, right? They're not being deployed. So as they go through and they look at, hey, I want to look at a converged infrastructure, I want to look at that next wave. Because there was an IDC study that went out and polled a whole host of folks, and they came back and they were asking, hey, for what is your, as you look through the care and feeding of your organization from your IT perspective, what is that percentage versus the time and effort that your team can do proactive and innovation for your organization? And a staggering 75% of those resources were based off of pre-deployment, deployment, and care and feeding of that infrastructure, and being bottlenecked and not being able to roll out applications and really be innovative in their space. And I'll take an example, a large healthcare organization out west that we've worked with. I was having a conversation with their cloud services director, and they had gone through a long due diligence process of not just the IT piece. And I'm not going to say that's the quote-unquote easy part, but when I have conversations with folks, that's what they tend to say. The challenge they have is with process and culture related to that organization. Because it is a change in thought process of how I deal with my infrastructure. Compute, network, storage, I got to coordinate all those conversations, patching, upgrading, code, BIOS, and that takes up a lot of resources. So as one organization said, hey, I was able to go from a 170-step process. I was able to reduce that down to 3. And that's the transformational change that organizations are getting with this converged infrastructure, because it's helping them consolidate, simplify, drive out complexity, and drive efficiency in their organization, so they can spend, instead of the 70-30 rule, they can do the 30-70 rule, right? 30% care and feeding and maintaining, 70% innovation and growing.
So you mentioned the cloud, and I think that is another thing that's facing a lot of us. What are some of the things that you could present to a client? And then I want to transfer that, we'll go downstream here.
Sure. So we do. We see, as we have conversations, a lot of folks that want to use a cloud. Now that means a lot of things to a lot of different people and different interpretations. So whether that's a private cloud, whether that's a public cloud, or whether that's some hybrid of in between. Organizations, healthcare organizations, in my experience, aren't ready for the full public cloud, right? Putting all their data out there. The private cloud, and with maybe some hybrid in there for some specific applications, or EMR and so forth, maybe some, that seems to be the best. And the challenge they have with that really does map back to the culture and process of how they run their operations, how they run the infrastructure that supports those critical applications. Whether that's a small hospital that's got 150, or some of these bigger ones that have thousands. How do they take advantage of that type of service, self-service solution that's kind of their nirvana? We talked to a lot of folks that, you know, they want to go from their parts and pieces now to get there. And so we've got hundreds of customers that have made that journey, and a lot of lessons learned about how they did that. And a lot of that is through process and culture of transforming the way that they manage that, and now can start to get, and it's all baby steps, right? No one is immediately jumping into the cloud and being able to offer this. It's that iterative process of looking at what are my critical applications. Maybe I go from my tier 2 first and then go get into my tier 1. It all really depends on the comfort level of that organization and what they're trying to accomplish. But I definitely see a lot of folks wanting to create their own private cloud to be able to then offer some of those services, IT as a service, and self-service to some degree.
Yeah, you know, when I saw that I was going to be sitting between the infrastructure guy and
Don't call me finance again.
I just looked at you. You're so defensive. It's like the rose between the two thorns here. But I look at cloud a little differently. I mean, when I was speaking with some of the healthcare provider CIOs not too long ago, I said, what's the one thing that keeps you up at night? And the first one they came back to was waking up and seeing my hospital's, on the front news, on the front page of the news because of a data breach, right? I mean, that's what everyone worries about. And the second one is that I can't innovate fast enough. And cloud offers all these promises, but the first one keeps me up at night. The second one just gives me heartburn, right? So when you think about what, I'm very familiar with VCE, have an EMC background, and what I love about the VCE platform is that it kind of allows you to, like you said, take baby steps from a process perspective, but it also makes you look at your applications from a portfolio perspective, right? I mean, you need to portfolio manage out systems that you're not using on a day-to-day basis anymore. And the benefit that you get from a converged infrastructure is so great that you have to be able to run those apps on x86 technology, right? So if you're running old mainframe systems or proprietary platforms that the company's not even around anymore, the risk of running that system and still requiring to maintain and access the data or preserve the data for the life of the patient and then some, it's a catch-22. There's things like, and this is one of the areas I focus on at Informatica.
You can stay on VCE, keep going.
I love VCE. No, it's great because it's a baby step to going to cloud, right? You start to classify, okay, these are the systems I can move to x86, these are the processes I can start to turnkey from an infrastructure perspective, and then these other business processes that I can feel confident about moving to a public cloud, like payroll, right? I mean, payroll is one of the first outsourced apps that most people did because ADP was great at it, but no one looks at it as a cloud service. But they run this business, and it has some of the most sensitive information that you can imagine, right? And we have no problem getting our paycheck from them, right? Or outsourcing that business. So once you start looking at that, and then you look at things like Viva, right? Or like any type of CRM system that's in the cloud, it's not so scary anymore. And so, again, if you're moving away from kind of the old school, the way things were done because, that's the way we did them, to, all right, I'm not ready to jump full-fledged into public cloud, there's always these like phases that you can take. And I love looking at it from an application portfolio perspective, especially using the opportunity of an M&A activity, right? If you're going through a merger, you're going through an acquisition, and you've got 15 systems that are doing the exact same thing, and you can pick one that's the most modern that allows you to streamline and cut costs. I mean, some of the programs that I did for data center consolidation, we saw just by doing financial systems consolidation, I had to do it, $15 million savings right off the bat just by eliminating systems that were running on mainframe that weren't required anymore, right? And you could move them to x86, you could start getting higher efficiencies in the servers. So that's one part. The second part is around the privacy, right? I mean, if you look at some of the cloud providers, they have more people on staff that know more about security than people on your staff, right? I mean, because that's their business, right? I mean, they have teams of people that get certified, and you guys probably have a handful of them that are, have the beeper tied to their Fitbit so that they get electric shock every time there's a breach or something, right? It's just, but you think about it, right? We're moving towards the cloud. If you don't have a cloud strategy figured out and you don't have data privacy kind of cornered in terms of this system has sensitive data, this system doesn't, if you haven't figured out that classification piece, then it's going to be a bigger barrier for you. But I'll tell you, the benefits and the agility and the ability to roll out new apps, for me as a patient, I want to be able to open up my iPhone, right, and have it sync to my Fitbit and have that information go to my primary care physician to say, hey, look, next time I go to my physical, you can believe me when I say I've been walking every day, as opposed to saying, yeah, bullshit, right? That's the kind of thing that our children are expecting, and the only way we're going to get there is if we start adopting cloud. So that's my answer to that. Are you sure you're okay with it?
Yeah. So
I'm waiting for a question because I can talk to you about clouds. How
I
they
figured
develop and
you'd let sort of.
yeah, I have no idea. So, go ahead. I'll leave. You're going to talk about clouds.
Yes.
The only clouds that I know are the clouds that I see when I fly around the country. Seriously, I'm not being sarcastic.
Okay.
My iCloud.
Finance?
No, you can pick a subject that I have no. She doesn't believe me.
No, you must know something. No.
About clouds?
Yes.
No, I do not.
Okay.
Seriously.
So let's talk about process and culture then.
Oh, when it comes to an EHR implementation?
Well, when it comes to what are we facing with ICD-10? That's, I think, that's not necessarily something that people will think about the cultural impacts.
Well, well, you're forced in a way to invest on a robust EHR system, okay? Because you do want the detailed description of what you performed as a provider. So there's many systems out there, and I'm pretty sure that how many are in Epic right now? Okay, so Epic hasn't conquered Massachusetts yet or New England, but what about Siemens? It's mostly, yeah. And so there's many robust systems out there, and it's very difficult for me to tell you which one is the best. One thing I can tell you though, is that when you purchase a system, what you want to have is involvement of all departments, clinical departments obviously, IT departments, and revenue cycle departments. What we're seeing with the EHR companies is that they partner with the IT departments and they say, here are the keys. Do not allow anybody drive the Porsche, right? Am I wrong in this one? That's exactly this is exactly the instructions that you're getting from the EHR companies. As a result, what we do is we have a successful, in quotation marks, implementation. But when it comes to the actual production, we fall into issues like WorkQ Health for the Epic clients, or revenue cycle, revenue integrity issues for any other AHR client, and most importantly, to go back to the ICD-10, pregnant, in quotation marks, documentation. Providers will find it very easy to start pulling information from all around every single department. So an office visit with an upper respiratory infection turns out to be literally 55 pages of results and other information that they're not related to today's condition. So the impact is that we are all struggling and hustling in order to get ready for the ICD-10, and we're missing the main point, which is robust, correct, accurate, detailed documentation involving when the implementation of any HR system, or even post-implementation, if you're into HR system for a long time, bring everybody back. And that includes providers. IT leads it, okay, because of the changes. But bring your providers in and bring your revenue cycle people in. Do not keep them aside, because you are going to see a significant drop on your revenue after ICD-10 kicks in, a significant one. And that will be a result of either not enough documentation, not enough training or side-to-side assistance to your physicians, or because the third-party carriers are not going to be ready. So you are going to have all these claims sitting there. So we are going to see this culture change, which is the partnership of IT, revenue cycle, and providers in order to be successful.
And now I'd like to open it up to the audience for any questions. You want to just raise hands? Pat?
I have a question for Julie, and it has to do with whoever was collecting genomic data. I used to work in clinical trials and in health information management. And I think we have to think about the future as well. So even though we don't need that today, shouldn't we at least be thinking about, well, maybe we don't need it today, but we're going to need it 3 years from now, and maybe have a placeholder or something? Do you have another perspective to that?
Sure. So for those of you who haven't heard the question, it was a commentary and a question on my point about analytics is ahead of us. We have to, just embrace the fact that we're going to be building analytics systems. And the question was, look, if you don't have a plan today for how you're going to analyze the data, but you know that you need to start collecting it, what's the interim step, really? How do you start planning when you don't have a goal, right? And, so that was really kind of the, I almost go back to the, people built a data warehouse to collect information because they didn't know what they wanted to look at in hindsight. And it's almost like building the data warehouse for data that you may need. The strategy there is, it's kind of a balance. It's a catch-22, right? Because you want to be able to have all the detailed information so that when you want to do predictive analytics, the more detail you have, the higher accuracy you're going to have, right? If you only store summary data, then your accuracy is going to be, less. So there's a balanced trade-off, and one of the strategies that we actually see happening a lot within Informatica, because we're the ones that are either migrating the data or integrating it or pulling it from a legacy source, is if you're going to pick a parking lot for the data, pick something that's going to last, the technology is going to last longer than the VCE platform that it's sitting on. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful, right? It's literally, think about what operating system we were running just a couple years ago. I mean, I had to get my mom from, one version of Windows to the next, and it was painful just walking her through the wizard, right? But if you're talking about genomic data, we want to be able to pull back 10 years ago. And the technology 10 years ago, I mean, none of us had iPhones then, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to think about, all right, from a long-term perspective, how can I preserve this data and make it agnostic to the infrastructure platform that I'm sitting on so that I can always access it? And that's kind of, I'm not giving an Informatica pitch per se, but that's why Informatica's been in business for as long as we have, because we look at, all right, there's always going to be a source, there's always going to be a target, and the platform that data is sitting on is always going to change. You have to plan for the change. And so what we tell our customers and what I tell my clients when I do consulting projects is to, if you're going to pick a vendor to store the data, whether it's a database, or you look at longevity. If you're going to pick a platform, you want to look for portability, right? If you're going to pick an archive technology, make it accessible, open, queryable, using a standard that everyone is working with, whether it's SQL or XSLT or something that has been adopted by universities because they're teaching the children who are going to be doing the analytics 20 years from now. I know I don't really have like a pinpoint answer, but I will say that if you don't start if you don't start building in change into your processes today, and you're doing a major refresh, you're gonna, the pace in which you're gonna be doing those refreshes is gonna be more, more frequent. And to your point, that 70-30 is gonna be, it's gonna be painstakingly it's gonna make you just halt your innovation completely. So hopefully that was some answer to that.
Thank you, Professor Maloney. As one of the children being educated in health informatics, actually taking classes from Professor Maloney last term, I'm interested in when we hear about analytics, are we all thinking the same thing? Because sometimes I feel as though there's purposes for, say, claims or risk assessment, lots of different meanings. So do you have a thumbnail, or is it the same thing each time?
So,
when you say analytics.
So when I say analytics, it's a general category, right? I mean, there are different types of analytics that people are conducting. I mean, the first one that I would say is what most people are doing in the industry today is basically reporting, right? They're looking hindsight and they're looking for trends. And that's really just looking at, how do we do today compared to yesterday? And it's using statistical analysis or time series analysis to look at what's the difference and tell me, do I think that this line is going to continue going in the same direction, right? So that's looking backwards. Categories of analytics are things like predictive analytics, where you're looking at, I have a series of events that I want to see in an outcome that I'm looking to see what are the things that would predict this particular outcome. And there's always going to be variability. Right now, that predictive analytics is where a lot of focus is being made because there's enough data available, enough data being collected that people can make more accurate predictions, okay? Because before, we didn't have the infrastructure or the detailed data available to make those types of analytics, really believable. There was a guy here from Mathematica, and I was all excited to talk to him about analytics, and he's back. There he is, back there.
Right.
So I look. There's predictive analytics. There's modeling. There's scoring to look for different ways. Risk analysis is just a use case for those types of analytics, right? You're looking at financial analysis. You want to know, right? For example, is your revenue stream going down and why? That's operational analytics, right? And operational analytics is I'm actually looking at a business process. I'm tracking it using historic data, but I now need to model to see if I tweaked it this way, if I improve the time to market with, the new process, what's the impact to my revenue stream, right? Those are the different types of modeling. So analytics as a category is really falling into, historical analysis and predictive analytics. So that's generally speaking. Yeah, and I would also say, like, for example, my son's in college right now. He's computer science and game design. I mean, he's spending half his time, Mom, I'm really studying as I'm playing these games. And, he's taking research. I'm researching on this, and I need the money to buy this game because it's part of my thesis. Bullshit. But when I asked him what coursework he's taking, he said, there's a track on data science. And I said, well, what are the courses? And he said, it's statistics, it's predictive analytics. And I'm like, God, those are the same classes I took, but they were called statistics, and those were my math requirements, right? But the fact that there's this whole data science practice, it just means that it got some great, mathematicians got great marketing, so. Because the math is...
That and physicists.
Yeah, physicists, right.
Any other questions?
Sure.
No, you have to come up or shout.
I think you have to
Why
come
don't
up.
we meet halfway? Can you meet halfway?
Come on down.
Kind of hard to hear back there, so I'm
Yes.
gonna take the mic back there,
That's the better.
okay? So I think this has been, very compelling to listen to all of the stories, and they were very accurate. I think it's very compelling in what you've talked about. I've had, 26 years or so in the industry and worked in a number of different capacities, both as a CIO and with different suppliers. One of the things that didn't get mentioned was when we're talking about analytics and the data, big data and cloud is when I look at this audience here, very healthcare focused, what about hosting? You know, taking that burden off of the people who are delivering care and putting it on the experts to provide that solution as a service, which really lowers the overall cost because the refresh rate on technology is significant, but we've got these great technology companies here talking what sounded like your environments, the people who are here, and the environments that you work in every day, and the challenges associated to that. So I was just curious to see where are you in supporting that step to allow them to just adopt their software and you to drive their technology.
I'm just kidding.
Take that microphone away from her.
So as an infrastructure provider, we kind of take we definitely are. I mean, at the end of the day, we're gonna support what that organization wants to do and how they want to get there. And I think I kind of go back to this iterative process where there are certainly some applications that they say, hey, I want to be able to have this hosted, right? And there's a whole handful of applications that do that. And so organizations like mine, right, we offer a variety of managed services to kind of almost take it to that point, right? So if they've got a whole host of applications and they want to say, hey, listen, I don't have the time, the effort, or I don't have the resources to manage this and keep this up to date, I want to basically have VCE or another organization basically go ahead and run this entire thing on my behalf, right? Manage it, update it, do everything it needs to do, just let me know how things are going. That's probably the closest you can get to then having it hosted off-prem, right? Where now everything is run actually in the cloud, right? So from a public cloud perspective, that's where that application lives, and you just tie into it and interoperate with it, regardless of where you are. So that's, I'm seeing more and more of that. I'd say probably what I see across the, several hundred customers that I work with, I'd say 80% of those are definitely in a cloud investigative mode, right? And looking at converged infrastructure as a way of helping facilitate that. And then probably maybe 20% of that are either, or I'd say the remaining 20 are either I'm still just trying to get my arms around them in kind of crisis response mode, I'll get back to you later. And then there is that kind of another group that is saying, hey, I don't want to have to deal with any of this. I want to take all this off my hands and I'm done with it altogether. So we kind of see that, but I say the majority is still looking to do a private / public cloud, so probably a private hybrid model that's going to help them maybe eventually get there, right? So because we work with a lot of service providers that offer those, and they certainly see the benefits of converged infrastructure, and so we run, the VCE sits underneath a lot of those service providers that actually host those applications.
Do we have any other questions? Or did anyone else, do you want to comment?
The only thing I was going to add to that is that what's interesting from a data integration perspective is that even though you want, there's a trend to move these business processes to a hosted environment, which we're seeing, right? I mean, I mentioned ADP as a payroll and like CRM type systems. You still need to be able to integrate it. So even moving to a hosted environment just means that instead of managing software and development cycles, you're managing SLAs. But you just think about the need to be able to integrate the data, and that if you are going to move to that model, you have to have a plan for that, because at some point you're going to want to do analytics on it.
And that's exactly what a lot of people I think are starting to see, that you can host it, but it's that integration. You think, okay, hosting it, I'm going to reduce my costs, I'm going to require less resources, and the resources end up being on the integration side so that you have the data.
Yeah, and
That's exactly it.
And that's actually one of our fastest growing business units. Informatica is our cloud, service. So you can rent our data integration software, connect to, Salesforce in the cloud, and integrate with an on-premise system as a service. So We're moving there, our customers have moved us there, and we're starting to see, I mean, the fact that it's, like I said, one of our fastest growing business units, the market's going there, right?
And we have time for one more question. Bob?
So if you, I don't need a microphone, I don't think.
Probably should stand up, though. Stand up.
So if each of you were talking to your top 50 customers, what would be their biggest, three-part question. What would be their biggest concern? What would be their biggest challenge? And what would be your primary piece of advice? It doesn't have to be all the same topic, but each of your organizations.
From a revenue cycle perspective, that IT is obviously involved. There's no such a system as open box, customized system for your organization. Do not believe it, do not buy it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, I only have a job. So customize it, prepare it if you want to optimize it, if you want to implement a new system, or if you want to upgrade your current system. Involve everybody, including the providers. Here's what we have noticed. We have noticed that the billing and coding responsibilities have transferred from the business office and the coders into the providers. Do we have any providers in here? You know what the providers have told you? And do not say that they haven't said that to you. You did not ask me when you bought the system. You didn't ask my opinion, says the nurse, who's now forced to know what a J3567 means. By the way, I don't need it, but some kind of medication, right? So there's no such a system that it will be automatically, and I'm using the language that companies are using out there, you just dictate it and it's gonna drop the charge. It needs a human intervention. And when you have a nurse who's taking care of 3 patients on the ICU and she needs an IV bag, I guarantee you, regardless of what system you have to automatically drop the charges, if she doesn't click the OK, she's not gonna click it. I guarantee you that. And you're gonna end up losing thousands and thousands of dollars. So my advice, just to conclude, will be think if you do decide, which obviously if you spend millions of dollars either optimizing or changing a system, involve your providers, take the feedback, and customize the system in such a way that clinically it makes sense. You as IT, you drive it, it's going to be, again, I'm going to use the expression, all Greek to you because the providers are going to tell you what they perform. Customize it, and then ICD-10 is going to become easier, charge capture is going to come easier. Never exclude the possibility of bringing back subject matter experts and place them in key departments that the revenue is lost, i.e. radiology, cancer centers, pharmacy, emergency departments. There's no such a system out there that I've seen personally that does a good charge reconciliation process in order to ensure capturing of the revenue. So involve them, enhance it, customize the heck out of it. And if you don't have the people, it's worth it to bring people in to help you do that. If you're implementing a system, new system, do a pre-implementation assessment. I'm telling you, you're gonna save yourselves an ulcer. Okay? So that's my advice.
So as I talk to folks, it's by far and away the organizations want to have better agility on how they can respond to their constituents, right? Patients, doctors. They want to be able to just at the drop of a hat be able to kind of roll out new applications and be able to do that in a much more cost-effective and efficient manner. And so there isn't one organization that I've spoken to that says, oh, I've got everything locked down, my IT department's perfect, everything is fine, I don't have any problems. I can do patch upgrading in 5 minutes. So I get a variety of those types of input. So my advice back to them is, again, it's not just the IT piece. It really does. And so what we kind of just recommend is taking, and we have a variety of different tools to be able to do this, but to help them really understand what is that true cost and how much burden does their existing process actually put on their team, and what are the costs associated with that? Because I've done this a couple times, and they are amazed with how much hidden cost they don't even know that they're spending, and how much that's dragging down their ability to innovate and roll out applications and be much more proactive in delivering services. So I'm hearing back that, hey, we want to be more agile, we want to be more innovative, we want to be able to roll out things that it doesn't take me 6 months to get an application out, but they don't know where to start. They don't know what piece to cut or what piece to change. And that's where it helps someone that has done this multiple times to show them that roadmap and to say, this is where you are, this is where you want to get to, these are the orders of magnitude, this is the process that you can follow. And that can help them kind of put that plan in place, so it's going to be able to help them go through budgeting cycles, and it's going to give them, their director of IT, that CIO, is going to have much more credibility and more likelihood to get there if they have a plan like that, as opposed to just saying, hey, I need some money to buy more servers or some more hardware, some more infrastructure.
So I mentioned already that one of the conversations I have with our customers are around data privacy, right? I mean, everyone has it top of mind, and it doesn't take much to do a Google search to find out which hospital or a peer of yours has recently experienced a breach, and it's embarrassing, right? So when I talk to our customers about that, I think, well, there's the other side, which is we want to unlock the potential of information so that we can get more insight out of it and take advantage of it and improve our business efficiency. So we're kind of caught between data lockdown and it impacting our ability to innovate. So my recommendation and my advice always is, the first place you have to start is you have to have someone who's responsible for the data. And because data gets locked down into all these different applications and business processes, there tends to be a lack of focus on what information do you guys actually have. And I'm a huge proponent of having someone like a chief data officer or a chief officer or someone from a top-down perspective that looks across the systems, looks across the business processes, and can start to provide those data dictionaries or open up the opportunity for people to gain access to it and communicate it. And then from a advice perspective is look at some of the biggest initiatives that you have coming down the pipe, whether it's implementing a new EHR or if it's doing a consolidation perspective. Look at where look at your skills gaps, right? And if you want to get better control over your data and you want to innovate, and you look at your skills gaps, I would recommend today to start looking at the staff and the people that you have and make sure that not only do they have, that's why I was asking this one woman where her background was, not only do they have domain expertise in the healthcare systems, but they have to understand how to leverage data. And they have to have an informatics background or some technology background. So when you start looking at your hiring, I think the skills gap it's big now. It's going to be even bigger if we don't start proactively looking at people who know how to answer the question like, what is analytics, right? And be able to come to the table with some suggestions.
Okay, I'd like to thank our panel. I think we had a lively discussion here.
So I want to also thank Mary Maloney, who I didn't introduce properly in the beginning. Not only is she a CIO and a professor, she works at Senior Whole Health, and she's our incoming president of New England HIMSS. So thank you, you did a fabulous job. And she did it to backfill someone who couldn't be here. So she did this on the fly, and look how marvelous she is. I mean, are we lucky? We really are. So also, should I keep talking about Mary? Because I think she enjoys it. Did you notice she's enjoying it? And Scott, thank you so much for being here. And I think you owe Julie a check maybe on the way out for her promotional consideration of your company, VCE. So thank you for your New England HIMSS membership. And Julie, thank you. As always, thank you for Informatica being here and being the data analytics guru. And then, of course, we have our financial guru over here, our Greek god, as we call him over at Leidos. Thank you so much, Vasilios, for being here. Great. Thank you, everyone.